Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to another episode of the LT1 right up there. Today we're going to be continuing to work on our plumbing, and we have our oil plumbing here that I've basically strategically set in place, and we need to get it installed and plumbed to the oil cooler. So these are AN10 fittings, and essentially they need to they kind of rotate a little bit, and they work pretty well. So we've rotated these just exactly where we need to circumvent the new location for the oil pan dipstick, which basically kind of goes right down into there. So I want to take this, I want to install it, and I want to show you how it's going to actually plumb to the actual oil cooler, and how we're going to prevent these from flopping around in the car, and also avoid any type of interference with the power steering rack and our sway bar, which has not been devised yet, but we're getting there. Why? Because it actually just came in. Here's our front sway bar kit. This is a 1-inch sway bar. It's a 25 millimeter, and it is universal. It's trimmed to fit, and you can see that we have 12-inch arms that are 1/2 inch thick, and these can actually be bent, which will be bent, to meet the location on the lower sway bar joint that goes to the perch. In this case, we have a 1-inch spring steel sway bar, and it is splined on one end, so we don't want to touch this end. This is the splined end here, so for removing and installing, you can put that guy on. This ends up getting welded to that, right? So this is, you can kind of see how the sway bar is going to look. And like I said, these guys get bent, so it ended up being bent, so it'll be bent in and over. So it'll meet exactly where I want it to meet on the spring perch. Now this is universal, which means it's trimmed to fit. So this part is not, it's just basically cut off. So we need to figure out what the length is going to be for this sway bar and trim it right where it needs to go. And they're basically accompanied by two polyurethane 1-inch bushings with its own block, and that gets installed right onto the frame rails. In fact, we can put it anywhere we want. I choose to put it on the frame rails because the frame rails are the most important and strong, structurally strong part of the application for sway bars. To prevent the actual sway bar from moving left and right, we have these collar locks. So these collars actually slide right over, and it locks right in place. So if you put one on one side right here, right, and then the other one on the outside of the other, or you can do it on the inside. As long as they're both on the inside or both on the outside, the sway bar itself is not going to move. And that's really, really clever. So on this side here, we have the other nut, the other end here that kind of gets slides over, and it's going to slide wherever it wants. Then what we need to do is drill a hole that meets this and put the loaded spring pin through that so that it actually rotates with that. And then obviously when you go and put the other arm on, it gets welded to that. So that makes this actually removable and tunable. So you can actually move it if you want one arm to be, if you want the arms to be higher or lower, or if you want to bend the arms. So it's actually pretty cool how this works. I've been talking long enough, so let's just start going in with the actual install onto the frame rails. Now I've got 1 3/4 by 1 3/4 by 1/8 inch thick tube, and that tube is going to get cut to size, and it's going to go right up onto this part of the frame rail. Now I have to offset this down, and the reason is because if I don't, and I just install, and if I install it just like that, it's actually going to be lopsided. It's not going to be functional at all. But also, if you look straight through the hole, you'll see that it will hit the bottom of the oil pan, and that's not good. So what we need to do is offset this down just a tiny bit, and that is what the tube will actually do. I'm going to weld the tube to the frame, and then this will get bolted on so we can remove it and install it as we please. now that I got both of the brackets basically exactly the same and ready for install, basically weld it right on, one stitch weld on that side, one stitch weld on the other side, and I'm not sure if I want to box it in yet, but could add a little bit more strength there. But now that I've got that done, I need to figure out a way to easily make this installable and removable. Not this part. These guys are getting welded to the frame rails. I'm talking about the actual pieces here that are going to end up going just like that. It's going to install just like that, right? Do I want to make a hole and make a nut on the inside and have a weldable nut on the back side of this, or do I want to have studs? I think I just want to have studs and make nuts that go, whew, drive them right down. Drive down on those nuts. So I got them all tacked on, and actually it looks pretty good. And from here to here, looks like it's gonna have a really nice straight shot without any interference to the oil pan. But I do obviously want to install the bar and see what the actual level would be for trim to fit. I want to see how long it needs to be. But overall, I think I'm pretty happy with how everything is turning out. These lock bolts are gonna be in really great shape and make the installation and removal super, super easy. And there's no interference to anything else. Okay, so I've got the bar basically set up here. Okay. I don't want to go too tight yet because I want to make sure that I don't have any issues. You can see the collars are right here. So these collars are going to end up going on the insides of each of these, and that's going to prevent the sway bar from moving laterally, because it's going to be blocked on one side on the inside and on the other side on the inside as well. You can see that the sway bar is way too long as it sits right now. So that's why we have to cut it to length. Gotta mark where that distance is, put it right on the cutoff saw, and we'll be in good shape. But yeah, everything seems to look like it's fitting really good. Got some good space to the oil pan here. So let's tighten everything up and then move this in a little bit first, tighten everything up, and then go from there. And this guy can be trimmed by virtue of that guy being right on that, and now we have our line exactly where we want it. In fact, I'm going to space it off just the same amount that I had it spaced on the other side, such that it's exactly the same dimension. So I need to cut right there. So let me mark this right there. There's a tiny little bit of a mark right there. That's where I'm cutting it off. And that's what I also need to then weld the other side on, drill my hole, bend my arms, and this is basically done. With a roll pin that goes in, you gotta drill the hole all the way through, stick the roll pin in. So what we need to ensure is that we have both of these arms exactly the same position. If we have a situation where one is just off by just a hair, it's going to throw off the balance, and one turn is going to feel tighter than the other, and it's just not going to be even. So the idea here is that we start off with one end, weld all that up, and then we make the other end to accommodate that exact dimension. Now, obviously, this is a flat floor, so this is a great place to start. Now, one click of the spline is just enough to throw this off pretty bad. So I need to make sure, and actually, I really don't even care about the splines at this point. I want to just basically weld this guy up, install it, and then when I fit that on, I'll know exactly where the other end goes, and then I can drill my hole from there. So we're very close now. So I welded these two guys on. One is the splined end, one is the open end with the hole that is going to end up getting drilled through for the spring pin. What we need to do is, and I've marked them already, we need to bend these guys with the Swag off-road bending tool. And as you can tell, these are opposites. That's exactly what we want them to be, and because they're on each end. So I've made the line on the correct end, and the line denotes bend in. So when I put the bender down onto the piece of metal, which is, Jesus, has to be 1/2 inch or 5/8, it's gonna bend it in just a tiny bit. And I wanna make sure that I bend both of these the exact same amount. And it might have to be iterative, so I might have to put it on, try it, then fit it up on the car, and go back and forth just to make sure that the bends are fine and I won't have any interferences after it's installed on the car. You have to be really careful about over bending, because if you bend too much, you really won't be able to bend it back without deforming the metal. So you want to go tiny little chunks. All right, so I've got the sway bar reinstalled, and I've got my arm, which I can easily install just like this. Should just slice right in there. And this is basically kind of torqued on, so I can easily move it and figure out exactly where the ride height is going to be. So if I turn the wheel in a little bit, I can tell that I definitely turned it, but it needs more. It definitely needs a lot more. So I want to bend this guy just a tiny bit more in. So I'm running into the same problem I had before, where if the wheel is completely down, then it's going to have different characteristics. So it does hit this. Actually, I'm almost at full lock at this point. So I think that the tie rod's gonna end up having full lock before this ever gets to this. And I don't have my steering rack in, so it's gonna be hard to tell. However, I think that at this point, I wanna bend it a little bit more in, and then I think I'm gonna be in good shape. Okay, so we've made a few adjustments to the sway bar mounting installation onto the frame rails. Added a couple complications to it, but it actually, from a form factor standpoint, is going to fit much better, and I'll explain that. But let's just take a look at the finished sway bar on the ground as it sits. So there it is. The ends have been painted, the collars are installed, and we have our bushings installed in the approximate locations when they need to be. This part is still splined, and that can remove and install very easily. And you can tell, probably hard to see here, but you can tell here that these two guys hit the ground at exactly the same time, meaning that they are perfectly aligned. So, having said that, we can take the sway bar, install it onto the chassis, and see how everything fits. This is the hardware that's used for the final installation. These are nylon lock nuts, which have never been used. They are really a one-time use, so when you use them, make sure that you have a permanent installation. In our case, we don't have a permanent installation, so I want to install it with these flange nuts that are not lock nuts. They just basically just jam right up and in there, and then we'll be able to install it that way. But when we do the final install, we'll use the nylons. So let's just get it installed, and I'll show you the differences that I've made since the last little snippet, and discuss why I did what I did. So the sway bar is fully installed now, and you can see that the bends on both of these guys go outward at the exact same angle as each other. The spacing I place for the blocks themselves are actually inward more from what I showed you earlier. In fact, it's not resting directly under the frame rails, but basically inset maybe about 1 inch on each side. And the reason for that was because this actually accounts for about 1.25 inches. So that when the wheel is actually on full turn, it would have hit this if it was sticking out a little bit further. So I actually made the bar even shorter, and this is now the furthest part, which actually is within the wheel well width from wheel well to wheel well. So this is not violating any of that. Even though the wheel will be inside of the wheel well cavity more during actual driving conditions, there is no opportunity anymore for the tire to hit this on a full lock scenario. So as it stands right now, this bar can go up and down without any interference. And the collars on the insides of each of the poly bushings ensure that there is no lateral or side-to-side motion. So that's also a really good key factor as well. The final thing that I wanted to bring up is, and I can install it on this side instead, is these are the sway bar links, right? These are adjustable links, so they have tie rod ends on either side. This is provided by California Tuned, CA Tuned, and they did a really good job of helping out with this. And what we'll do here is we'll just install it on the outside of the bar with a washer on either side. And we'll just mock install this because we're gonna end up going to a new suspension setup anyway. We're gonna go to like a bag setup, which would be an awesome video later on this summer. But for now, you can see that the sway bar itself is gonna be in great shape. It's actually perfectly in line for what we're looking to do. And there is gonna be no interference on the tie rod because the tie rod literally comes out and then down. This is actually, in its final state, will actually be set like this before there's weight put on the car. So the tie rod will come out and then come down. That basically comes parallel to the lower control arm into the tie rod arm on the spindle. So yeah, there's a lot of things that you have to think about when you're doing a sway bar installation, which is why it was so challenging for me to actually get this thing to install without any interferences. There's a lot you need to think about dynamically in order to make sure that you have a trouble-free installation. So that's it, guys. My name is Frank Macaluso from Garageaholic. Thank you so much for watching, and take it easy. I'm out of here. Later.